Imagine a minute on death row. Now, imagine tens of millions of minutes. A lifetime of waiting. Waiting to die. I don't have to imagine. I've lived it since December 9th, 1981. A lifetime in chains.
My name is Mumia Abu-Jamal. I'm on death row in Pennsylvania. Ex-president of the Association of Black Journalists in Philadelphia. I'm still a continuing revolutionary journalist. I write for anybody who wants me to write for them. And I'm fighting my conviction, fighting the sentence.
My name's William Frankham. I've been aware of Mumia for as long as I can remember. That's because he was arrested on the night I was born for the murder of a Philadelphia police officer. And as my mom would often remind me, every birthday I have had has been another year that Mumia has spent in prison. For 24 years he has sat on death row, and for 24 years he has protested his innocence. I'm almost 25, and I'm going on a journey to find out about the man who's been in prison my whole life.
The story begins on the night I was born. Mumia Abu-Jamal, a freelance journalist, was driving a cab to make some extra money. It was 4 a.m. and he had just dropped off a fare in downtown Philadelphia when he witnessed a violent altercation between a white police officer and a black male. As he drew closer, he realized that in fact the black male was his younger brother Billy, and that the police officer, Daniel Faulkner, was beating him in the face with a flashlight. Mumia ran to his brother's aid. This much is undisputed. Mumia has never given his full account of what happened next, but this is how Joseph McGill, the state prosecutor in the original trial, described events.
And he runs over and takes out this Charter Arms revolver and fires and shoots the officer in the back. The officer then manages to turn around a little bit because of the momentum of the bullet. It did not affect the vital organs at that time, and was able to get off a shot at that time, which hit Mr. Jamal in the chest area. He then, that is, Officer Faulkner, continued to fall down. And as he fell down straight on the pavement area, he was, for all intents and purposes, debilitated. The defendant, Mr. Jamal, at this point, having been stopped, went over and straddled the officer, took both hands and held the weapon that he pulled out previously and fired 4 times. One of the shots, that is the second shot or third shot, we don't know which, actually went through the, in between the eyes of the officer's head. That was the killing bullet.
This is what the jury believed, and this is what Mumia has been convicted of, the cold-blooded murder of a police officer. From the beginning, Mumia, a family man and father of 3, claimed he was innocent of murder. But an ineffectual defense lawyer and a trial which, according to Amnesty International, was in violation of the minimum international standards for fair trials, ensured that the prosecution's portrayal held sway. But as we shall see, this entire version of events was woven from contradictory evidence, altered testimonies, and a seemingly bogus confession. Fueled by the hysteria that followed this police killing, Mumia was effectively demonized forever. And after a 15-day trial, he was sentenced to death and taken to Pennsylvania's death row to await execution. He has appealed several times for a retrial, and in 2001, his sentence was commuted to life without parole. The state appealed against this sentence, and so he remains on death row. Now he's appealing again. His life hangs in the balance, 24 years and counting. As for me, I grew up in London.
London calling to the faraway towns. Now war is declared and battle come down. London calling.
When my parents divorced, my mum moved back to her native America with us kids.
I'm just an American.
We settled in suburban Long Island, which is where, as a teenager, my fascination with Mumia began. This was thanks mainly to my mum, who was a product of 60s America and its counterculture.
I always remember John Lennon dying near your birthday, Mumia being incarcerated on your birthday, and we would just kind of always talk about it, and I'd always say, that man's been in prison all of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I was listening to Rage Against the Machine, and suddenly it was this like full circle thing of like, oh god, they're talking about that Mumia guy. You know, like the mum used to always tell me about.
Yeah.
You know, and I must have been what, like 14, 15, and he sort of came back on my radar again.
Now we're people with their own philosophies, change the course of history. Everyday people like you and me. We're the peace, we're the people.
Thanks to my mum, music, and public radio, Mumia had found his way into my white suburban world. We would listen to his broadcasts on the independent radio program Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman.
From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now! As long as there's independent media, they can't lock it up.
Yeah.
As long as he can write books, as long as he can be broadcast on Pacifica or be talked about in films like these. But it's, you know, it's an absolutely key issue in our society, because all the horrors we're seeing in the world, in Iraq, Abu Ghraib, at Guantanamo, people in prison not getting any kind of a fair trial. It doesn't start there. It starts right here at home. It starts at the prisons of this country. In fact, specifically at the prison where Mumia is, that's where Charles Grainer was a prison guard. He's the man who was involved with the torture, low level, but at the torture at Abu Ghraib.
In an empire that picks puppets for other nations, this is not acceptable. It wasn't acceptable under the Roman Empire, the British Empire, nor its North American successor, the American Empire. For this latest global incarnation of the white nation, Arabs are but sand niggers to be beaten into submission and obedience. It is the refusal to accept this status that is fueling what the U.S. media calls the insurgency. From death row, this is Mumia Abu-Jamal.
Where do they feel that they've gotten the permission? What gives people the thought that this is okay? It starts at home, and what is taught to them about what is acceptable in the prisons of this country. And it's why Mumia's voice is so important, not only for people in this country, but around the world.
But most Americans don't know and don't want to.
Mumia's commentaries from death row were banned from National Public Radio. He now broadcasts on the Pacifica Network and on the web,
For these public illusions.
speaking out on the injustices of American society.
Signed on
They're strange
like slaves who sell their faces and their words to the power.
He has become known as the voice of the voiceless.
leaves and blood at the
Mumia has also written 5 books from prison. His first, Live from Death Row, was published in 1995 and became a New York Times bestseller. His literary agent and friend since those days is Francis Golden.
Wow. The media does not want the public to know that an innocent man could be killed. I mean, there's a story there that everyone should know.
Absolutely.
Recently, France, first of all, made him an honorary citizen.
Right.
And they've just named a street for him. The Fraternal Order of Police in Philadelphia found that out. they went berserk. So they've revitalized their campaign to kill Mumia.
The Fraternal Order of Police, often called the FOP, is a uniquely American organization. Part labor union, part lobbying group, and part political force. Founded in Pennsylvania in 1915, it now boasts hundreds of thousands of members nationwide. Its members are particularly influential in Philadelphia, and over the last 24 years have taken an active role in campaigning for Mumia's execution.
Will you do your utmost to see that this name of this street is rescinded? Whenever one of us is struck down in the line of duty in a horrible, murderous way, we want the world to know about it.
There was a time that people could photograph him, could video him, could tape him, and then they said nobody could do that. And there was a lawsuit because every other prisoner could have that. So there's a Mumia law.
Yeah.
A Mumia law in Pennsylvania that no prisoner can be taped, photographed, videoed, etc., in order not to be able to do that with Mumia. You can have this one.
Oh, really?
And I wanted to give you
Like this.
This is my daughter, Rini, who was arrested in the fight for low-rent housing in Cooper Square. And I was telling you that this is a picture of me on 10th Street and First Avenue when I ran for office on the American Labor Party ticket for state senate. Oh, I want to show you a wonderful picture.
Yeah.
This is Paul Robeson.
Ah, look at that.
And this is Sally when she was 5. And behind her is me when I was 26. It was a basement of a church in Harlem, and his head was amongst the pipes. He was so big. But I love that picture. My pleasure.
It's been wonderful. It's been absolutely wonderful. So nice.
What are your political opinions? Have they been changed at all?
My political opinions have only been deepened.
When Israel was in Egypt's land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand, let my people go.
After a long drawn-out process and months of planning, my girlfriend Katie and I had arranged a visit with Mumia on death row. Together we drove to Waynesburg, in the Pennsylvania countryside, home to SCI Green Prison.
Cameras are paid.
Imagine living, if it can be called that, eating, sleeping, relieving oneself, reading, weeping, but mostly waiting in a room the size of your bathroom. Now imagine doing all these things, but mostly waiting for the rest of your life. Imagine waiting to die. The state calls it death row. I call it hell. Welcome to hell.
You okay? Your passport.
Imagine waiting, waiting, waiting to die.
And it's a terrifying experience walking through that place. You know, you didn't see anybody. You know, like even maybe saw like 3 guards, and even then they were behind
that,
glass.
Yeah, and the glass is so dark.
And then suddenly, you know, we're there, and suddenly the guy pointed, and you know, we turn around, and there's Mumia sitting in this chair because he's got a bad ankle. He looks a lot older than he does in a lot of the pictures, because no one's been able to take pictures of him for a long time. We spent 5.5 hours with Mumia, and he made us feel totally at home in the most inhumane of circumstances. We were talking to a man in an orange jumpsuit, his wrists in manacles through safety glass, and yet we established a connection. What shocked me was the complete lack of physical contact. That Mumia has never held his grandchildren, and yet remains so human, is nothing short of a miracle. Before we left, we touched fists through the glass, and I hoped one day that we would shake hands properly. But for now he returned, after a full cavity search by the guards, to the sheer isolation of his cell. Robert Bryan, Mumia's current attorney, was in town and visiting his client the next day. I wanted to know more about Mumia's current appeal, and asked Robert to explain it for me in plain English.
We got a victory in December of 2005 in which the U.S. Court of Appeals agreed to hear some major issues involving racism and the politics of the case. And just by the mere fact that this court says, we will listen to you. You can brief these issues. Yeah. To me, it was the first time since his arrest in 1981, your birthday, that there is some light at the end of the tunnel. It doesn't mean we've won, but it means that for the first time we have an opportunity to win this case, get him a new and fair trial. The 3 major issues, other than one dealing with the death penalty, deal with the guilt phase. And if we win on any of those 3, he gets a completely new trial. It's back at the beginning. We go back to square one, which is what we want. The 3 issues involve racism in jury selection. Another is a very biased argument by the prosecutor, which in effect turned reasonable doubt and the presumption of innocence on its head. And then the 3rd issue is the bias and racism of the trial judge, who incidentally during the trial was overheard by a court stenographer saying, I'm going to help them fry the nigger. I'm going to help them fry the nigger, referring to Mumia. So, you know, it would be better if he said, I'm going to help them convict this man or see that he gets executed. I mean, that's horrendous. But he also referred to Mumia in the most offensive, derogatory term, at least by U.S. standards, imaginable. I never dreamt that I would see that level of racism I saw in the South, but much greater, actually, in Philadelphia, the city, the cradle of U.S. democracy of this country.
City of brotherly love.
Yeah, city of brotherly love, yeah.
As the casket of Daniel Faulkner emerged from the St. Barnabas Church in southwest Philadelphia, nearly 1,000 of his fellow officers saluted as the family strained to stand up under the pressure of today's ceremony. Faulkner's young wife, Maureen, widowed after just a year of marriage, had hoped to celebrate her husband's 26th birthday in just a few more days. Fellow officers from 165 separate police units had come. Some of Faulkner's closest friends today were his pallbearers.
Daniel Faulkner and Mumia Abu-Jamal were both sons of Philadelphia, both descendants of immigrants who came to this city looking for a better life. This city that, despite its history of lawmaking, was to become synonymous with an increasingly oppressive style of law enforcement. Philadelphia in the 70s and 80s was once described as the closest thing to a police state the USA has ever known. Mayor and ex-police chief Frank Rizzo instilled a culture of racism and brutality in his police force.
When they begin the charges, they begin to throw stuff, we're going to take them on, okay?
Nowhere was this more shockingly demonstrated than in the ongoing confrontation with a small radical collective called MOVE. Based on the teachings of John Africa, MOVE followed a back-to-nature and anti-authority communal lifestyle.
This is MOVE, and this is 309 North 33rd. MOVE is a totally revolutionary organization, and the purpose of MOVE is to exhibit by its activity the purpose of revolution.
Their militant approach brought out the worst in the Philadelphia cops. During a raid in 1978, MOVE claimed that a baby was trampled to death by the police in a scuffle with its mother. The police tried to evict MOVE from their house in the Philadelphia suburb of Powelton Village for violating housing code and sanitation laws. MOVE then responded by barricading themselves in, and an enraged Rizzo ordered a blockade of the entire neighborhood.
They're going to be taken by force if they resist. No question about that, children or not.
The siege lasted for over 50 days and culminated in a shootout, or perhaps more accurately, a shoot-in.
7 in the morning, they kicking down my mama's door. Now tell me what is this motherfucking drama for? Can the nigga get rest? Let me rest without the stress. Then they put the Glock to my chest. Best take part. We go up her shot. They got a nigga locked like the dread on my head. And if I try to fight back,
one police officer was shot and killed in the chaos. MOVE claimed that he was caught in friendly fire. Despite protesting their innocence, 9 MOVE members were convicted of this single murder. They became known as the MOVE 9 and are still in prison today. As a young journalist, Mumia Abu-Jamal covered the MOVE story and was deeply affected by what he saw.
Kicking him on the head. I have no idea. I just couldn't see. Shut up!
Lynn Washington was a contemporary of Mumia's and is now a professor of journalism at Temple University in Philadelphia. I asked him what it was like to be a black journalist in such a racially turbulent city at the time.
You have to understand that during the 70s, Philadelphia police shot and killed more people than the police in New York City. And at the time, New York City was 4 times larger than Philadelphia. Yeah. So we had a horrific problem. We had a horrific problem, so much so that in the fall of 1979, the U.S. Justice Department sued the city of Philadelphia for police brutality. And for the first time in the history of the United States, the Justice Department alleged that the mayor and his administration actively aided and abetted police brutality. An unheard of lawsuit.
Black journalists like Mumia and Lynn found themselves on the front line of this racial war. And as far as Mayor Rizzo was concerned, you were either with him or against him.
They believe what you read, what you write, what you say, and it's got to stop. And one day, and I hope it's in my career, that you're going to have to be held responsible and accountable for what you do. That you're going to have to be held responsible and accountable for what you do.
With the MOVE 9 in jail, the war was over, but not for long. MOVE relocated to Osage Avenue in a black middle-class neighborhood of West Philadelphia and continued to protest the innocence of the MOVE 9. By 1985, the stage was set for another battle.
So they come back in 85 and decide they got to do the job right this time. And that's why they came with the bomb, composed of C4, military plastic explosive that no local police department has. They got it from the federal government, the FBI.
After another lengthy suburban siege, Rizzo's successor, Wilson Goode, Philadelphia's first black mayor, sanctioned an extraordinary action. The police bombing of Osage Avenue resulted in the deaths of 11 MOVE members, including 5 children. The fire department let the fire rage for several hours, engulfing the entire neighborhood. 62 families lost their homes. Ramona Africa and 1 child survived the fire. Ramona was arrested for incitement to riot and spent the next 7 years in prison.
I am the only adult survivor of that massacre, and I still have the burn scars to this day. You know, 1 little boy survived, 30, and he was burned severely as well. 11 people, 5 children and 6 adults, were burned alive and found to have bullet fragments in them.
To this day, no one has been held responsible or accountable for this terrible crime.
People still come up to me to this day, tell me that they remember exactly what they were doing that day when they heard about it, how they turned on their television or happened to look at their television and thought they were seeing, you know, Beirut, Vietnam or someplace, and was, you know, shocked to see that it was Philadelphia.
That you're going to have to be responsible and accountable for what you do.
Yeah, I'm from the illest part of the Western Hemisphere. So if you into sightseeing, don't visit there. It's somewhere between Jersey and Delaware. Philly never scared. And the
that you're going to have to be responsible and accountable for what you do.
It's easy to see how a young black journalist like Mumia became so political in such a racially divided city. And if his sympathy for MOVE made him a political target, his membership of the Philadelphia chapter of the Black Panthers was to brand him a revolutionary. I drove to North Philly to meet 2 of his Panther comrades from this period, Barbara Eastley Cox and Reggie Shell.
Cecil B. Moore Avenue. Yeah. It used to be Columbia Avenue. Reggie!
Yeah, we went to see Mumia on Sunday, and he said, and we were asking him about the film, and he said, we said, oh, is there anyone you want us to go see? He said, only Reggie. Said you were the only person he wanted us to go see, and said that you'd been like a father to him.
Yeah, I've been with him since he was 14.
What was he like when he was younger?
He was just, you know, he was just a 14-year-old kid, man, jumping into a man's world, and sometimes he'd take a little break and go back to being a child, you know, go out and walk downtown and buy ice cream or something, and walk around and look at sights and chase girls, and you know, but then when it, you know, when work was called for, Mac was always there to, you know, to buckle under and get it done.
Born Wesley Cook, Mumia joined the Black Panther Party while still at Benjamin Franklin High School. There, he campaigned to rename the school Malcolm X High, and later changed his own name to Mumia Abu-Jamal, which is Swahili in origin. By 15, he was already Minister of Information for the Philadelphia chapter of the Panthers. Not just a political organization, but a provider of social welfare for the city's black community. What else were you guys doing? I mean, you know, you spreading information, you guys were doing food programs. I mean,
we were agitating. That's what I liked about it. I mean, we enjoyed ourselves by sticking it to them every chance we got. all his life, you know, he's been in struggle, but he's never been on the bad side of police lynching.
Yeah.
You know, he always really believed if you get into court and you got your stuff together, facts will exonerate you. And I told him they're going to lock you up, they're going to try you as a panther. And that's exactly what they did. They didn't have no evidence. They just convicted him on a speech he made about political power. Comes out the barrel of a gun. I was reading it.
Yeah.
And I said, that's it.
The prosecutor at Mumia's trial used a quote attributed to Mumia to demonstrate his aggressive and violent nature. It was a saying of Mao's that political power grows out of the barrel of a gun, which Mumia had quoted in reference to the murder of Fred Hampton in 1969.
Black people.
Fred Hampton was a young and charismatic Black Panther from Chicago who was shot dead in a hail of police bullets at the age of 21. It is now known that his assassination was organized by the FBI as part of its counterintelligence program, also known as COINTELPRO. Over 5,000 people attended Chairman Hampton's funeral, including Mumia and fellow Philadelphian Noam Chomsky. Professor Chomsky has been teaching at MIT in Boston for over 50 years. I went there to ask him about Reggie's theory, that Mumia's case has been affected by his political affiliations.
Having someone on death row for 25 years, is that normal in this country? And what does it say about the country?
It's not so abnormal. There are lots of people who are on death row for a long time trying to pursue appeals or something. Guilty or innocent is irrelevant. First of all, they shouldn't be on death row in the first place. Civilized societies don't allow the state to have the power to kill people. So, the problem in the first place. But the drawing it out is just another sign of the nature of the society. It's sometimes described as dysfunctional, but I don't really believe that. It's functioning. It's functioning to frighten the population, to build up support for power, to harm the people in question. In Mumia's case, it's a special case because he's articulate and outspoken and is saying things that power centers certainly don't want heard. Part of his indictment was statements that he made at the time of the Hampton murder. Our one semi-contact was at the Hampton funeral, and it was a hideous case. I mean, it's one of the worst state crimes in our history. This was a state crime, FBI organized assassination of a black organizer. Totally fabricated evidence. The FBI got the Chicago police to go in at 4 a.m. and murder him in bed, kind of like Gestapo-style murder. It was impossible to build up any interest in it. It didn't make it into the press. I mean, the information, the truth about all this stuff came out at the same time as Watergate.
God bless.
And of course the Hampton murder was just one small piece of a major state program of repression, the worst one in our history, COINTELPRO. All got exposed, 4 administrations, really serious, went all the way up to political assassination. Mumia was there. He made strong statements about it, as he should have. They were brought up at his trial to prove that he's a terrorist, which is utterly outrageous. I mean, it was the state that was the terrorist. All of this stuff was exposed in trials at the same time as Watergate. Why was Watergate important? I mean, did Nixon do anything? Yeah. Almost nothing. He called powerful people bad names. He, burglarized somebody's office. Annoyed the Democratic Party. Yeah, not nice. But it's not shaking the foundations of the Republic the way COINTELPRO was. A major state program of repression, atrocities, even up to murder.
When Mumia stepped into that Philadelphia courthouse in 1982, he assumed that he could rely on the right of every American citizen to a fair trial. But Mumia was no ordinary citizen. He was a Black Panther, known MOVE sympathizer, and leftist journalist. In a city where the authorities would later find it acceptable to bomb their own residents, it now seems hardly surprising that the odds were stacked against him. He also made a poor choice of attorney, which allowed the prosecution to take control of a trial that often descended into farce. There are three main arguments for a retrial, and I went to Philadelphia City Hall to meet Dave Lindorf, author of Killing Time, to talk me through them.
When you're talking about jury selection, that is probably the single most important part of a case. Preparation, evidence, witnesses, statements. Doesn't mean anything unless you have a good jury.
Well, what we know is that the prosecutors in Philadelphia during that time had a deliberate practice of minimizing blacks on juries.
You don't want smart people. You do not want smart people. They take those words reasonable doubt and they actually try to think about them.
There was a 75% rejection rate of blacks using what are called peremptory challenges, where you don't have to give a reason why you're getting rid of a juror. For cause, you can do as many as you want. You have to, if you can give a good reason why a juror shouldn't be on a jury and the judge agrees with you, that juror's gone, and you can do that 1,000 times. But the peremptories are limited to 15.
In selecting blacks, again, you don't want the real educated ones. Again, this goes across the board of all races. You don't want smart people.
The end result was that you had a jury selected that was 8 whites and 4 blacks, but then before the trial started, they maneuvered to get one more black juror removed from the case. So now you had 3 blacks on the jury in a city that was 44% black. So clearly, there wasn't a proper racial balance, and there was no reason to reject them.
When a jury comes in the room, the 40 people come in the room, count them. Count the blacks and whites. You want to know at every point in that case where you are.
Presiding over Mumia's case was Judge Albert Sabo, widely known in Philadelphia as a friend of the prosecution. Sabo had a reputation, and so did Mumia. When he entered courtroom 253, the Black Panther was about to come face to face with the hanging judge.
So this is where it all took place, huh?
Yeah, looks like they're redecorating it.
And this would have been Sabo's courtroom, is it?
This was his courtroom, right.
An increasingly frustrated Mumia was frequently banished from the court by Judge Sabo, and the trial, which lasted just 15 days, was often conducted in Mumia's absence.
Defense, prosecution.
The prosecutor that day was District Attorney Joseph McGill, who effectively turned the presumption of innocence on its head. He convinced the jury that they should err towards a guilty verdict. He told them that Mumia would get appeal after appeal, and that their decision would not be final. In other words, he undermined the constitutional requirement of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt by lessening the jury's responsibility in imposing the death sentence.
Sabo was going out here with his court clerk, and that's called the cloakroom. So Terry Carter was the court stenographer for a Judge Richard Klein, who was a civil court judge. She and he came in here after hours to come into this courtroom. He had to put his robe on. Sabo is coming out this door with his court clerk at the end of the first day of Mumia's trial. And they hear the tail end of this conversation with the clerk saying, yeah, and I'm going to
help them fry the nigger. And the
So
race
you must have been shocked.
Well, what shocked me, and I do remember, and this is, you know how you remember things, like, I never expected this to become part of history. But what shocked me, and I know, I mean, racism and everything aside, I'm not belittling that. What shocked me was the case had just started. To me, justice for Mumia and Daniel Faulkner are the same thing. And for you and me. The court system is what's on trial.
Murder is not a political act. It's a crime of violence, so we have no sympathy with it. When you murder a police officer, anything else that you may be about, you've given that up.
So certain were the Philadelphia police that Mumia had murdered Daniel Faulkner that they went to extreme lengths to ensure his conviction. Officers Gary Bell and Gary Waxhaw were both present at Jefferson Hospital when the injured Mumia was wheeled in after the shooting. They claimed in court to have heard him yell, "I shot the motherfucker and I hope he dies."
I walked over to him to look at to see who had just shot and killed my partner, and he had shouted out that I shot the MFer and I hope he dies. He said it once more, and I leaned over and responded that he shouldn't die, you should.
However, neither of these officers wrote this on their police reports at the time, claiming to be too emotionally devastated by events.
I didn't write any notes at that time. I made no notes.
Waxhaw's report even went as far as to state that the Negro male made no comments. It was to be a staggering 2 months later, after a meeting with prosecutor Joseph McGill, that the police officers were to report this confession. They stuck to their story in court despite undermining medical evidence from the doctor who'd attended to Mumia.
I saw him from the minute he was brought into the emergency room through that door. He never said a word. He never screamed or yelled. He never said anything. In fact, even after I spoke to him and said, "You need to calm down and let me take care of you," he looked at me with an understanding look, but he never said anything.
In reality, Mumia was semi-conscious and his lungs were full of blood. He would have found it very hard to speak at all, let alone shout abuse. There were 3 key witnesses at the trial who testified to seeing Mumia shoot Faulkner that night on Locust Street. A cab driver who was on probation for firebombing a school, a passing motorist on his way home from a party, and a prostitute working the corner. The chief eyewitness was the prostitute Cynthia White. She was later revealed to be a police informant. The police tried to blackmail another prostitute, Veronica Jones, into corroborating Cynthia's version of events. While she was under arrest for felony charges, they paid her a visit and offered her a deal.
I was visited by 2 white males in suits, but I was told they were my lawyers. So when I went down, they told me that they were detectives, and they were telling me how they could work a deal with me. They told me all I had to do was name Mumia as the shooter, Mumia Jamal as the shooter, and that they would make sure that I got off on 15 years, 5 to 15 years, and also any other charges that I was already in there on, which were a number of charges. And it said that they had helped Cynthia White out, so they would help me out also.
She had 2 young children and was vulnerable.
And you don't know how good that sounds to somebody that's going away for 15 years.
In 1996, Veronica Jones's conscience got the better of her, and she came clean, making it clear that she had never seen Mumia shoot Faulkner.
It was a big lie. A lie that could almost cost somebody their life. And I hope it did.
When she later testified for the defense at Mumia's appeal, the police once again tried to intimidate her. No sooner had she given her testimony than 2 New Jersey state troopers entered Sabo's courtroom. They arrested her straight off the stand for a 5-year-old charge involving an unsigned check for $250.
I'm from the illest part of the Western Hemisphere, so if you in the sightseeing, don't visit there. It's somewhere between Jersey and Delaware. Philly never scared, and them ain't timid, yeah.
I talked to a lot of people in Philly about Mumia's case, and they all had their own take on events.
Can you put me through to Gene Blagman's office, please?
I spoke to his friends and family, and even the headmaster of his old school, but I was anxious to get the other side of the story.
Alright, we'll see you guys later. Take it easy. Will you be in the office now?
City make a dark impression. The youth just lost and they want direction. But they don't get the police, they get the protection. And walk around with heat like a Charlton Heston.
I tried to interview the Fraternal Order of Police and the District Attorney's Office, but was met with a wall of silence. Hi, could you put me through to Joe McGill's office, please? Yes, could you just tell him that Will Franklin called... I don't know whether this is a deliberate policy on their part, or is more down to suspicion or apathy. Whatever the reasons, it is why their voices are not represented in this film. Meanwhile, my friend Michael Schiffman, an author and specialist on the case, had tracked down some brand new evidence on the web. He took me to the outskirts of Philadelphia to meet a photographer called Pedro Polikoff. Pedro was the only photographer who had been present on Locust Street on the night of the shooting.
How are you? Nice to meet you. Pleased to meet you. Oh, man, I'm like, no, I'm feeling right now. There's some things that we never forget. I can even tell you the developer that I used, how long those negatives were developed.
What did you see when you arrived?
First thing I saw was police kind of running around, one on the corner who looked at me very strange as I pulled over, but, you know, he didn't care when he saw the camera equipment. And the VW.
Was the scene orderly? Was, you know, what was the general feel of it?
Ordered chaos. Is that a good?
Sure.
Detectives weren't even on the scene at that point. No crime units were on the scene. It was pretty much open. The only thing that prevented me from actually inadvertently walking up behind and going over the blood trail itself was the fact that they had a single police barrier to the one side, and the only other thing they had at the other side was a police officer standing there saying, "Don't walk, you know, stay back."
Did it seem like they were doing much forensic work, or...?
They weren't doing any forensic work.
Really?
Come on, the one officer's walking around holding the police officer's gun and the alleged murder weapon in his hands. With
no gloves?
No gloves. No gloves. Didn't bag it. Nothing. I mean, the whole time I was there, he's walking around with the guns in his hand.
Did you try to get these pictures out to defense, to the prosecution?
I called the district attorney's office. I told them, you know, that I was the first and only photographer on the scene. I have a lot more photographs. You know, and if I could be of any assistance, let me know.
Sure.
Never got a call back from them.
Really?
Never got a call back.
And for 25 years, these have never really been seen, right?
Nope. Bingo. Right there. Here's the two guns in his hand. Very clear shot.
My God.
There we go. 400% enlargement. There's the service revolver.
That would be the officer's? Or?
That would be the officer's revolver. And right here, behind it, is the charter arms. You can see the second trigger guard. You can see the second barrel.
Yeah, that's right.
In fact, while we're at this kind of resolution and sharpness, let's take a look at the cement. That's supposedly where he was laying and where he was shot. I don't know about you, but that's pretty clean cement to me.
The ballistics report stated that Mumia's gun contained 5 spent shells. According to McGill, 2 of these bullets hit Faulkner, 1 fatally. So where were the other 3? If Mumia had fired point blank into Faulkner's face as he lay on the ground, where were the traces of these bullets in the surrounding cement? While bullet fragments were found in a nearby doorway, Pedro's photographs seemed to show that the pavement cement was completely undamaged. Routine tests, such as the smelling of the barrel and the swiping of Mumia's hands, could easily have clarified the situation at the time. But no such tests were carried out. Or at least, if they were, the results were never presented in court. So where was the evidence to prove that Mumia had fired the gun at all? Let alone fired first. The fact that Mumia was carrying a gun at all that night should not surprise us in an American context. He was driving a cab, had already been robbed twice, and felt he needed protection. It was a .38 caliber Charter Arms revolver. The bullet found in Faulkner was also a .38, but this was the most widely used caliber at that time, and it was never matched to Mumia's particular gun. The trajectory of the bullet that passed through Faulkner's body was upwards through the back, exiting at his throat where it blew off his clip tie, all of which suggests that the shooter fired from below. Furthermore, the trajectory of the bullet through Mumia's body was downwards through the chest, which would make the prosecution's scenario that Faulkner shot upwards at Mumia as he fell impossible.
And he runs over and takes out this Charter Arms revolver and shoots the officer in the back.
Just roll slowly until... The prosecution scenario seemed increasingly like a bad work of fiction. The bullet traces found in the doorway on Locust Street seemed to undermine the idea of Mumia firing first, shooting Faulkner in the back.
This would have been right where Billy Cook was.
And crucially, if Faulkner had fired second as he fell, how did his bullet enter Mumia from above?
The defendant, Mr. Jamal, at this point, straddled the officer and fired.
It seems to me that Joseph McGill went to great lengths to conjure up an image of a cold-blooded murderer and crazed Black Avenger, an image that was clearly meant to enrage. But what if Mumia was just an ordinary citizen, responding on impulse to the sight of his brother Billy being attacked by a police officer, shooting, if he shot at all, in self-defense? Of the many unanswered questions surrounding the events on Locust Street, the most persistent and intriguing concerns the presence of another man in the car with Mumia's brother that night, a close family friend named Kenneth Freeman. The prosecution deny he was there, but a driver's license found in Faulkner's pocket suggests otherwise. Years later, on the very same night as the Move bombing, Freeman's body was found dumped, naked, and handcuffed in a deserted parking lot. The autopsy stated that he had died of natural causes. Several witnesses had reported someone fleeing the scene after the shooting. Another, who added a further twist to events, was Robert Harkins, who was not called to testify. Harkins told the police that he had seen a man on Locust Street that night who was both larger and stockier than Mumia, the same build as Kenneth Freeman in fact, who had grabbed the officer from behind, pushed him to the ground onto all fours, and shot at him several times. This scenario is consistent with a tear in Faulkner's trouser leg and a bruise on his knee. So did Kenneth Freeman shoot Daniel Faulkner? One person who should know the answer to this is Mumia's brother, Billy Cook. When the police arrived on Locust Street and discovered Daniel Faulkner lying dead on the pavement and Mumia Abu-Jamal slumped bleeding on the curbside, they also found Billy Cook standing there shocked and shaking, the only person who had witnessed the entire series of events. Billy Cook has never been interviewed on camera, but agreed to speak to me provided that Mumia's lead attorney, Robert Bryan, was also present. We went to see him at his sister Lydia's house in the leafy suburbs of Philadelphia. He seemed eager to talk, but was understandably cautious about how much he should reveal regarding the events that changed his and his family's lives forever.
Yeah, I was a street vendor for about 8 years. You know, we get off at work, and we usually just ride around town and try to unwind. You know, maybe have a beer or something. Yeah. That's what we do before we go home, and that's what I was doing at that time when I got stopped by the police. The lights were behind me before I got to 13th, so I crossed 13th and pulled over. Yeah. As soon as I got across 13th Street, I pulled over to the right. Yeah. And he pulled behind me.
Were you alone?
No, I wasn't alone. No.
Who were you with?
I was with a friend of mine. I don't know if I want to mention his name right now.
You were with somebody else, and you get pulled over. So what happens then? I mean, you...
I exit my car, and I walk over to him. He told me to get back in the car first. And I'm trying to find out, why are you pulling me over? You know what I mean? Because You get to a point where you get tired of just people harassing me. If I did anything wrong, tell me what I did wrong. He wouldn't tell me, so he got out and we had some words, let's say.
Yeah.
We had some words.
And you talk about seeing a lot of racism and exhibited by cops in Philadelphia. Did you get any overtones of that at that time?
I think that's the first thing I got from him. He was kind of vulgar and nasty. And if I remember correctly, he threw a slur in.
Such as? Like what?
Well, the nigger. Nigga, get back in the car.
Were you ever hit with anything?
Yes, I was.
Tell us
very
what
hard.
You remember about that.
We fought when we were out in the street. We were arguing. He pushed me against the car and he hit me. He hit me and I tried to block it. I still have the scars right on my head now.
Really? What was he hitting you with?
I don't remember. It was either a nightstick or a flashlight. They arrested me for assaulting him, but I never laid a hand on him. I only tried to protect myself. I never hit him.
While admitting that there was a passenger in the car with him that night, Billy was reluctant to name that passenger as Kenneth Freeman. Yet when we get on to the subject of Freeman's death, it seems obvious that this was one and the same man.
Kenneth Freeman died in strange circumstances, it seems, on the very same day as the move bombing.
Yes.
Were you suspicious of his death?
To the day, we still don't know what happened. They would talk about maybe heart failure, or he may have got beaten.
He was handcuffed, wasn't he?
From what I understand.
Do you think that the police would be capable of murdering Ken Freeman? Do you think?
Yes.
The circumstances surrounding Kenneth Freeman's death have led to inevitable speculation about possible police involvement, and to questions about why they and the prosecution were so keen to erase him from the story of Locust Street. Did they believe Freeman to be Faulkner's killer? Was he the third man, as described by Harkins, who had pushed the police officer onto the ground and shot him before fleeing the scene? Given the history of this city, it's hard not to suspect the worst. But is it really plausible that the Philadelphia Police Department, having seen Mumia wrongly convicted of murder, would go as far as killing Freeman by way of rough justice? Clearly Billy, who had been a victim of intense police harassment, thinks that it is. And this may help explain why he did not testify at his brother's trial.
The attorney at the original trial didn't call you to testify?
No.
They didn't call you to
I think it was everybody who suggested that I need to just lay low, and that's what I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you afraid for your life?
Of course. Every day.
You still?
Every day.
Fear kept Billy from testifying 24 years ago, and he has lived in fear ever since. Now he says he is ready to take the stand, but he can only do this if there is a new trial.
If I was to speak about certain things, it would have to be under oath and in a court of law.
Okay.
You know what I mean, that's just the way it is.
Meanwhile, many theories abound. One, as we have seen, has Freeman as the murderer. Another has Mumia firing in self-defense. And each theory points to the same thing: enough reasonable doubt to justify a retrial for Mumia Abu-Jamal.
The FOP is stating that Mumia is guilty of killing Faulkner. Let's have a trial. You know, we want a fair debate. You know, no 3 minutes here for him and 3 minutes here for us. Let's have an open town debate. Let them bring all their lawyers, everybody on their side, and let us bring our side and let the people decide.
Well, in the Bible, there's a passage, I believe it is chapter 8 of the Gospel of John, in which Jesus of Nazareth describes Satan as a liar, the father of lies, and a murderer from the beginning. Based on what I've heard here today, I'd have to say that that description is chillingly accurate when applied to Jamal and to his twisted disciples.
The authorities and Mumia supporters seem to be in a constant conflict, played out almost weekly here in Philadelphia's City Hall. The Philadelphia City Council have passed a resolution condemning Paris for the street naming, and Mumia's supporters are outraged.
Show how foul and corrupt they are. And
Pam Africa, a MOVE member and the head of the Mumia movement in Philadelphia, has been denied an official meeting with Ann Werner, the head of the council, about this, and is intending to disrupt the council in order to draw attention to her cause.
I don't have time to play. I don't have play. I brought you the resolution. Yes, you are. You're pretending for the people that...
The council includes Councillor Good Jr. and Councillor Rizzo Jr., both sons of former mayors.
You're not getting away with this. And you're a killer just like your father. Yeah, I understand, yeah.
He is here today as the guest of Councilman O'Neill.
There's a dysfunctional family atmosphere here in the chamber as the council grinds into action. There's a long history here too, of old and unresolved battles. Battles that are still being fought over street namings and council resolutions.
The ayes have it. The motion carries. Thank you.
Miss Werner, you promised us a meeting on Mumia Abu-Jamal some time ago, last summer, and because of the documentation of a resolution that was put in here. Miss Werner, it's Pam Africa. I spoke to you from this floor last June on the issue of Mumia Abu-Jamal.
Why has Philly, a city that gave birth to two great black boxers like Sonny Liston and Joe Frazier, chosen to have a statue of a white fictitious one called Rocky Balboa? Has it chosen to believe in a fictitious history of itself, rather than face up to the real one? An ingrained culture of racism and mutual suspicion seems to live on here. And I wonder what happened to that brave new world of equality that Mumia and his contemporaries were fighting for back in the 70s. What has happened to the voice of Black America and that vibrant counterculture that seemed to go hand in hand with revolution and reform? What has happened to that America? The America that as a white middle-class kid I inherited through hip-hop and rock music, through cinema and sport. Did it, as some say, die a quiet death in the 80s? And if so, is Mumia's voice, the voice of the voiceless, speaking into a void?
We're winners, and never let anybody say that you can't make it, 'cause people's mind is in your way. We're moving on up.
I went to see one of the most famous political prisoners in American history. Someone who was in a parallel situation to Mumia 20 years ago at the height of the civil rights movement. I wanted to ask her why the movement to free Mumia has not had the same impact as the movement to free Angela Davis.
How you doing, Angela? Will Frankham. Nice to meet you.
I often think about the similarities and differences between the mobilization around Mumia and the mobilization around my case, which happened in the early 70s. And, you know, what does it mean to try to do this kind of work and achieve this kind of victory? It was possible to do the kind of organizing here in this country that established a firm basis for the movement. And while we've been working for many, many years to build support for Mumia, I think we've built a substantial amount of support, but we haven't reached certain circles. We haven't reached people who are kind of off the radar with respect to progressive or radical political struggle.
It often feels like it's preaching to the converted.
Exactly, exactly. Maybe I'm being naive, or maybe I'm overly optimistic, but I still believe that it ought to be possible to do that kind of work in a different way, in a different context. Because if you think about it, we're talking about the Nixon era. And during my case, Richard Nixon was the president and Ronald Reagan was the governor of California. And so it felt very repressive. Yeah. I mean, I was called a terrorist by the president of the country. So it wasn't an easy period. No, as a matter of fact, you might say that there are a lot of similarities between that period and this period. What was different was that there was a visible movement.
John Lennon wrote a song for Angela Davis, and so did the Rolling Stones. Musicians and artists played their part in the civil rights movement, in what seemed to be a golden age of activism. The movement to free Mumia reached its peak in the 90s, when the Beastie Boys, Rage Against the Machine and others toured the country raising money for the defense. But in today's media-saturated America, is it possible for musicians and artists to make any political impact at all? Some still try.
This is for the streets. The streets everywhere. Streets affected by the storm called America.
Invited to perform anything but his political songs at a recent MTV Awards ceremony, Mos Def decided to set up a stage in the street outside to protest on behalf of the victims of Hurricane Katrina, a gesture for which he was promptly arrested.
So I got this rig, and I figured we'll roll up to the VMAs and just kind of tell the truth, you know, and raise the issue that nobody's raising. There are loads of these artists that are from Texas and Atlanta and all of these places, and you know, their music comes from communities that are New Orleans in composition and attitude and all of that. And nobody was saying anything, so I was like, you know, we have to just go start again. The arrest part of it was where I was like, okay, now you're just getting crazy. It's one thing to shut me down and to give me a citation, and I showed you guys my permit, but it's another thing to arrest me. Yeah. What exactly are you arresting me for? Yeah. And then they won't even admit that me and my crew were arrested. They say that we weren't arrested, we were taken into custody. Yeah, in handcuffs. In handcuffs. The most interesting thing about that entire episode is that the way that the police mobilized on me was not... It was a reflex. It wasn't premeditated. It wasn't like this guy's an enemy of the state or he's a threat, or that. It wasn't even focused on what I was even had to say. It was just that their response to any sort of dissent on an almost cellular, subconscious level is to suppress it. Yeah. That it doesn't even have to be thought about or considered. So it's instinctual. It's instinctual.
No matter how much money you make or how much power you get as a black man, you're going to always be a nigga in their eyes, no matter what. Remember, they never let a black leader get to the point of leading Every time he gets to the point of leading, they kill him or put him in jail.
To those who battled against all odds, to those who would give birth to the gods, to those who will not yield, to those who came before, to those who are to come, I dedicate this shield.
The Black Panther Party and the Civil Rights Movement, they tried to abide by the laws. They tried to go by the system. We're gonna march and march till our feet get sore and get whooped and sprayed with water hose and bit by dogs and just all kind of shit. Then once the Black Panther Party kicked in, the government, Hoover, put together a team to kill the whole fucking Black Panther Party. Not to arrest them, but to contain, as they say. How do you contain a nigga? You kill him or you lock him up. And they started knocking off the head motherfuckers from the party. So that's when the Crips originated, because we was like, fuck that. We not gonna roll with this system and do it the way y'all wanna do it. We gonna do it our own way and fuck y'all if y'all in the way.
The language of dissent may have changed since Mumia's youth, but if the movement has gone underground, then maybe it's rappers like Mos and Snoop who are the spokesman for today. But has their success as black artists also helped reinforce the image of an integrated America in which the battles of the civil rights movement have been fought and won? If so, there was one event that would destroy that image forever.
It is amazing the evocative power of one word, one name, Katrina. In a flash, in an hour, in a day, in a week, we saw with our own eyes the loss, the waste, the death, and perhaps worse, the dismissal of black life by virtually every agency of state power. For if the state was deadly by its ignoring of black suffering, the media was deadly by its poisonous attention and its perversion of the truth. If U.S. blacks had any illusions, the dark, fetid waters of Katrina washed them away. The waters of Katrina cleared the crust of sleep from our eyes and taught us that if you're black and poor, you're utterly on your own.
I don't really watch much television, but you know, I turned this on, and the very first thing I saw in the horrible devastation that was being you know, brought in by Katrina, the first thing I saw was this thing that everybody's seen about, you know, the black people looting. Now, I'm a Southerner, and so I was deeply offended because I know, you know, I mean, I know they're looters, and I know those, I saw somebody with a big TV. But I also know that there are millions of people who are just trying to live and, you know, decent lives. So ultimately my response was to get on a plane with my friends, and got my nephew and his girlfriend from Atlanta, and we went to meet the people in Houston. Okay. Just to say, we know who you are, because you know, many of the people died because of that, because they had been set up to look like they weren't worth saving. And so the days went by, the weeks went by, the months went by, and still many of the people have nothing. You know, they're tossed to the winds.
Do you think that slavery was ever really dealt with?
Slavery is still very strong in terms of its effects. You know, when Spike Lee makes his films, at the end of each one, he has a little symbol that stands for 40 acres and a mule.
Yeah.
And that is to remind us that we were all, each black person, each head of household anyway, was entitled to 40 acres and a mule. Did we get 40 acres and a mule after 300 years of labor for no money and no land and nothing but abuse? We got nothing. Well, in the South, when I was growing up, you know, we were taught that you cannot fight back. You cannot fight back, because the more you fight back, if you fight back at all, you just make them really angry, and then they're more vicious. And I think with Mumia, part of it is not simply wanting to, you know, just, destroy someone who dares to speak up. But there is a degree of envy. Yeah. There is a huge degree of envy. It's this feeling like, I have starved these people. I have kept them from being educated. I have forced this religion on them that, tells them they have to stay in their place. I have, just a whole long list. Never let them have a voice in government. Never let them go to school. And damn, they're still going to sit here and tell me what they think. How, how dare they, kill him.
Given the bloodlust of his enemies, public apathy, and media indifference, it's amazing how Mumia keeps on speaking out, not only for himself, but for those who lack the means or the self-belief to do so. Perhaps he feels that he's part of something greater than himself. Part of an ongoing struggle, a people's history of America. Mumia's voice reminds us that change is possible. He speaks for an idealism that will not be crushed, which for me is the idealism of the American dream. The real threat to that dream are the systems of oppression which attempt to crush voices like his through political force, through fear and intimidation. So does this make Mumia a political prisoner?
My name is Robert Meeropol, but I was adopted along with my brother Michael, who's 4 years older than me, by Abel and Ann Meeropol in the mid-1950s. I was actually born Robert Rosenberg. My parents, Ethel and Julius Rosenberg, were arrested when I was 3 years old and charged with conspiring to steal the secret of the atomic bomb from the United States and give it to the Soviet Union. And this charge took place at the height of the McCarthy period in the 1950s. And they were executed on June 19th, 1953, just not long after my 6th birthday. And so my brother and I are the only people in United States history, at least as far as I know, to have had both their parents executed. Abel and Ann Meeropol did not know the Rosenbergs. But they were supporters of the Rosenbergs. Abel Meeropol was a songwriter. His most famous song was Billie Holiday's signature song, Strange Fruit, which was about lynching.
Southern trees bear strange fruit.
Way back during the 1970s, when I was involved in reopening my parents' case, when I was traveling around the country giving speeches about freedom of information and the like, that this young guy, and he was very young, interviewed me in this crowded radio studio. And it was an hour-long interview about my parents' case and the reopening effort. And then at the end of the interview, the interviewer asked me a common question that I was often asked in those days. He said, do you think something like your parents' case could ever happen again? And since we were agreeing on just about everything, we basically agreed that, yes, it could happen. That the color of the person might be different, the political situation might be different, but there could be a similar case in history again. But the person who asked me that question, that interviewer, was Mumia Abu-Jamal. And now he is the first political prisoner in the United States to face execution since my parents.
Is it important to remember that in such a highly politicized case that the danger to a human being is still so very real?
Yes, in fact, in a highly politicized case, in some ways the danger to the human being is heightened because there are these general legal rules. I mean, Mumia's case is like a manual for what shouldn't happen. Whether it be keeping blacks off the jury, whether it be a racist judge, whether, it being the use of a falsified confession, whether it be, being police coercion, cover-up, you name it, it's there. And you look at it legally. His grounds for appeal have actually grown. Rulings at the higher courts give him a stronger legal position than he had a few years ago. And yet we have to stop and say, maybe he's in the best legal position to win a new trial than he's ever been in. But he's not an ordinary death row inmate. He's Mumia Abu-Jamal, and that means who knows?
No, I've got to go back to England, and in a sense my journey is over. How long do you think it will... Is this going to go on indefinitely? Is there, even if you win a new trial, is it going to be appealed? Is it going to be appealed? Is it...
This case will not continue, will not go on indefinitely, even though I know it's taken a long time. But it's on the fast track. We will have oral argument soon. Even though we're still in briefing, I have indications from the U.S. Court of Appeals that they want to go ahead and schedule oral argument before a 3-judge panel. If it's upheld, the conviction and death judgment, this is the very negative side, but being realistic, and the Supreme Court denies review, then the execution would happen relatively quickly.
Despite the reasonable doubt that surrounds so many aspects of this case, speaking to Robert had brought home to me the real threat that Mumia's life is still under. And after 24 years on death row, the real possibility that he may yet have to face the stark brutalities of the death chamber. Was this a reality that I should be prepared for? And what would be involved? To find out, I went to talk to someone who had witnessed a state execution at first hand.
I've been corresponding by mail with Jonathan Nobles for, 11 years.
Mm.
And then suddenly I get a call on the telephone one day, and it was from the penitentiary in Huntsville. And so I knew there were several inmates I corresponded with, but nobody had ever called me before.
Oh, okay.
And it was John, and he said, the sergeant, on this shift is pretty nice to me, and he let me call. And he said, the reason I've got a few more privileges than I normally have because I've got an execution date.
Right.
And he asked if I didn't know what to say to that. And before I could even recover from that, he said, and what I was wondering is if you would be willing to come and be a witness on my behalf at my execution. And, you're basically dealing with the requests in advance, which is what's really insane, a couple of months in advance of a dying man. Think about that. Think about the inhumanity of that. Think about the idea of us, as a collective, decreeing that a human being, a perfectly healthy human being, is going to die at a certain time on a certain date. He had memorized a Bible passage, and he was reciting that Bible passage, and there was a prearranged signal, actually, is what they try to do so that the warden will get together with the inmate, and they'll prearrange something, that the inmate says, that the warden knows that he's ready after his last words. John, he got through this Bible verse, and then he started singing, and I was the only one that knew why. He had talked to his mother, who had been trying to get a hold of. John was raised in foster care, and hadn't talked to his mother the entire time he'd been in prison. And we tracked him down, and he talked to her the day before. And she told him during the telephone conversation that she liked the way that he sang when he was a little boy. She liked the way he used to sing Silent Night. And, John started singing Silent Night. Singing Silent Night was the signal, as it turned out. He was singing for his mother, but when he got to the line, mother and child, all of the air blew out of his lungs at once. It was like this. It was one of the loudest sounds I've ever. It was like, huh! And he wore glasses, really heavy glasses. And he wanted to make sure he could see everybody through the glass. So he had his glasses on, and his head pitched forward so violently that his glasses popped off, hit on his chest, and fell on the floor. And then he didn't move anymore. He was paralyzed, and he did not move anymore. And then you could sit there and watch him begin to turn blue. And then 5 minutes later, you know, the protocol says they wait 5 minutes before they check for signs of life. But you were watching a man suffocate, and you knew it. You know, you were very, very much aware of it. It didn't look like he was going to sleep to me.
Well, I seen them fight like lions, boys, and I seen them go like lambs. I helped to drag them when they could not stand. I heard their mamas crying when they heard the big door slam. I seen the victim's family holding hands. Last night I dreamed that I woke up with straps across my chest. Something cold and black pumped through my lungs. Even Jesus couldn't save me, though I know he did his best. But he don't live on LSU anymore. Swing low, swing low, swing low and carry me home. Swing low, don't let go. Swing low and carry me home.
Beautiful.
You have a collect call from
Mumia Abu-Jamal.
an inmate at a state correctional institution at Green.
Your will. Hey, this is Mumia, calling you from death row, of course. It's your birthday, December 9th, a date I never thought of as a day of celebration, of cake and happiness. To meet you, born on that day, 25 years ago, gives me a vivid sense of the time that's passed. To see you is to truly see that a lifetime has gone by. It's quite amazing, actually. In the meantime, I dream of freedom. The sweetest word I've ever heard. I dream of it every night. I dream of a country and a world where the death penalty is a memory. It's history. I dream of the absence of prison bars, the absence of shackles, the absence of the threat of death. Oh, happy birthday. I hope to one day meet you in freedom.
I came to court, cause the judge didn't even budge, didn't even look at him, shrugged and shook at him. He gave him life and threw the book at him. It's sad cause a man lost his life, families crying, witnesses lying, played by the PA, made by the DA. And it's in the game just like EA. You gotta have heart when you in the pen. When the game over, ain't no motherfucking starting again. Just might luck up. Nigga, shut the fuck up before you get stuck up. The way you feel, that's the way I feel. The real the deal and the real is. Like, what a night, what a night, what a night. Dead men talking, dead men walking, the wheel to wheel. Now the real is the way I used to live, and the way I live now is to educate and elevate the kids and give them more than weed and bottles of beer and show them how to live like this here. Yeah, I got a lot to say, cause ain't no fun when you're locked away. You gotta pay me, stay wagey, stay free. Lots of bull, seems like I'm going through obstacles. None too heavy, none too deep. Pen to the pad, rap to the beat. Benz and a Jag just traded them in and sent all of the money to the homie in the pen. Yeah, I got butter, man, to my homie Jamal. What up, man? And you wonder why we say, fuck the police. What up, man? Wrongfully accused, locked away with nowhere to turn. I'm back against the motherfucking wall. Yeah, but I'm still speaking the truth. You can't stop me. My words don't live on, man. You can kill the body, but you can never kill the spirit. My back against the wall, nowhere to turn. That's what's up, man.